We're going to get back into some of the more formal questions because we want to keep in mind that we want to make our conversation very accessible in the classroom. And so let's look at some of these questions, and you gentlemen decide which ones you want to jump in on. Also, for folks who are attending, if you have some thoughts about these questions, please offer your commentary as well. One of the comments we got from Nate Rice was that we were seeing a broad representation of race and culture, and I think we can add the richness of identity into the texture of those images. But you know, what conditions led to the protests? What were these protests about?
Yeah.
Alberto, you've covered some of this stuff. And
can I make finer point on that? So this image here we see on the right, we have there's just something about the technology here that's very different than this moment that I think is important. You can see that that woman in the corner there talking on a phone, and you actually see two guys holding up what could be smartphones, like they're live streaming, but those are radio guys. They're just making audio recordings. The technology was very different. And I've heard different accounts of how the mechanism of the takeover, like when they got into his office, I think they had to use the chancellor's very phone to make the calls to their friends. They couldn't just group text folks or, get them on WhatsApp and be like, hey, everybody come down to the chancellor's office. Can you talk about kind of how the actual takeover took place?
Well, it is my recollection that, it was about a matter of opportunity. And in the words of Jesus Salas, they were trying to wait for the perfect time that sort of the guard was let down, that led to them almost sneak in and actually lock the door. And they actually locked one of the administrators in the bathroom or one of the rooms adjacent to the chancellor's office, and that allowed for a large group of individuals to come in and really take over the space. Granted, there were more individuals outside and in the adjacent areas of the building, but it was almost strategic and in nature that they found the right moment, and given the conditions and the message that they wanted to convey, that this is their chance, their only chance to really take the message straight to the top administrator. And granted, Chancellor Klachi was not there the day they did that, but eventually he was able to get on the phone and talk to Jesus, and Jesus was able to convey, their demands, and then, it was a number of days, right, that led to a final decision. But, from the recollections also, people slept in the lawn in front of Chapman Hall. So this is a multi-day sit-in that folks were very committed and almost taking turns in occupying these spaces, but not letting down until they got an answer and they were able to accomplish their goal.
Who are some of the key leaders? Why don't we get into some of those names?
Sure.
Alberto, you dropped a couple. Eric, you can feel free to drop a couple as well. I know that many of these folks' names still ring out here locally. Just give us a roll call, if you can, for some of the folks who were key and central to the Chapman Hall takeover.
So often, we see in some of these pictures, obviously, the image of Roberto Hernandez, who was a member of the committee for the education of Latin Americans, CELA. CELA was the organized body that took these demands first to Dean Dean Davis in the School of Education, and they were working with Dean Davis. And it's CELA who, in conjunction with other organizations in the community, that sort of takes the lead. So Roberto Hernandez, Jesus Salas, Ernesto Chacon, a number of other individuals that sort of, take the lead in organizing uh, um, the takeover itself, or the events that took place in Chapman Hall during those days. Of course, you had 5 individuals that were arrested in that process. And again, both, like I said before, this is predominantly, Puerto Ricans and Mexicans coming together, which is, often, sometimes talked about, like there's division among our communities. At that time, it was very important that those 2 communities came together, because they had very, very unique, set of agendas and things that they wanted to really work towards. You had folks who were involved in the Brown Berets. You have folks who were involved in the Chicano movement. You have folks who were involved in the rights of migrant workers. And there was a conversion of ideologies, but that sort of found a common ground to say, what, these are the ills of our community. These are the needs of the community. And I think that's why it's so important that that community came together to do the takeover versus, the small number of students we had at the time, because it was the agenda of the community, right? They were demanding GED classes in the community. They were demanding that they had a satellite office in the community, that the person who would lead the Spanish speaking outreach needed to have a direct line to the provost or the chancellor,
Right.
and that there were teachers hired. And so there was a number of demands that echo, the sentiments of the community. And I think that's why the community becomes, a centerpiece in this movement.
Yeah, and you and I talked a lot about the importance of the community remaining connected to the Roberto Hernandez Center even to this day. Eric, you were a student working there.
Yes.
Talk to us about the importance of the Roberto Hernandez Center as a legacy of this moment.
Thank you. And just one small piece that I would like to add to what Alberto was saying is that, I definitely think we should be acknowledging and celebrating the leaders of that movement, and remember that a lot of them are still involved today in what is going on, right? A lot of them, you will see them at marches or community events. And in particular, I remember when I worked at the Roberto Hernandez Center and I was helping with our scholarship program, Jesus Salas would always provide donations to that fund for the scholarship, right? So a lot of those same leaders from back in the day are still leading in a different capacity today. And I think that's awesome. And then to answer your question about today, the Roberto Hernandez Center is a really beautiful place to me to see a concentration of Latino students kind of all backgrounds in one space congregating together, which is not a common thing in any school, in any predominantly white institution like UWM or many of our state public schools in this country. So to have your own kind of space where you're not going to be judged, where people speak your language, where there's counselors, wonderful counselors like Gabriela Dorantes, who are culturally competent, who speak the language, who know how to talk to our parents and grandparents that also have special questions. It's really a gem at UWM, and Bolton Hall in general is full of these gems of programs that were fought for and that need to be fought for to be preserved. Another really interesting thing about this space is when I was there, sometimes we would help organizations have meetings there, planning actions or planning events, on campus or off campus. And just having that infrastructure of a space where you can meet and be connected in the community, it's so powerful. It can't be underestimated. A lot of times we take places like the RHC for granted. And when we take it for granted, we don't defend them, right? Because we don't appreciate what we have. Right. But I got my bachelor's in sociology at the University of Louisville, where I spent a lot of time growing up in Louisville, Kentucky. And we didn't have anything like that. There was very few resources for Latino students. We did have a couple awesome counselors on campus. I was an organization of a group called Blackout of like LGBT people of color students. And that was something that was really important to me, but I never had a space like the REC growing up. So it was really, to me, a privilege to have that opportunity to work there. And I always kind of saw myself as continuing the work that was laid down, you know, continuing to lay bricks on top of that foundation that was already there for us from the generations before.
Sure. Hey, Adam, show us a few more images. Command Central, Keisha's telling us we got to move forward and get us into the teaching conversation, but show us a few more images as we begin to think about teaching, because we didn't even get through all of them. There's some more there. Keisha, we promise we're moving to the next section.
So I just wanted to, I want to show a few more images here. Okay. I mean, one quick comment, we can thread this through the rest of our conversation, is that when you look at the images, there are a lot of, the point that it's very diverse. There's a lot of women that are present. And a lot of times, I just want to say this, because it's actually, I feel timely in this current moment, is a lot of times male leadership tends to rise to they step to the mic a lot of times, and maybe don't think about who might not be at the mic as well. And in this conversation, I just want to point out the role of women within this is not, I think sometimes it can get diminished in the way that we remember. And I'm not saying specifically this story, but a lot of times those fade into the background.
And Adam, if I may, I feel compelled to enunciate some of those names of women, since I have some of my notes in front of me. You know, people like Marla Anderson, who was one of the 5 arrested during the takeover, you know, Clementina Castro, Enriqueta Gonzalez, Maria Ortega, Juanita Renteria, Delfina Guzman. I mean, the list goes on, and these are the names, as you mentioned, that often are not, you know, mentioned when we talk about this momentous occasion in our history in activism. But these are brave women who were mothers, grandmothers. I recall also that during those days of protests, even they held mass outside of Chapman Hall. They held mass. And, you know, the faith community was on board. You know, Reverend Jaime Davila, who was instrumental in the Christian Center in the near South Side that later led to the Spot, that later led to the creation of the United Community Center. I mean, you had individuals who were intricately embedded into the community and knew firsthand what were the dire needs of our families and our students. So,
you know, a way in which the students kind of made that critique too, and during these protests, where we're just seeing a few images here of people breaking the systems in ways that I think are really clever. You know, obviously we saw some traditional forms of protest like marching there. These are women who are looking for Spanish-speaking texts in the library and not finding any. You know, there were folks that went to the finance department or went to different spaces where
registrar's office,
that were created to help students, and then kind of just pointing out these aren't working. And I think those forms of protest, in almost in some ways, a little bit as theater, right? To create this moment of here's what it looks like for our systems to break down, and making sure they were being documented. To your point, Eric, you're kind of writing history and creating it at the same time. So some of these, go ahead.
There's another really important component to this that we oftentimes don't talk about and certainly lose sight of, which is student protests, particularly in this moment, really help to redefine what the student rights are on campus. And it's Black and Latino students who are pushing universities to expand rights that would then extend to all students. And so we also have to think about the important components of how student voice then becomes a central part of campus culture because of the ways that these young folks are pushing against what is what is it, in loco parentis and all of that. They're redefining what those definitions mean. It's not only the folks out at Berkeley, it's also the folks here in Milwaukee and other Latino voices are part of that conversation.
I just want to really quick get through what some of the response was to the protest, which was police, which might not be surprising. This is actually a protester handing food to an officer, which I think is a really important gesture of kind of where they were. So they're certainly, as is reflected today out in our streets, police are part of that coordinated response. And here are kind of the unwinding images. So we can go back to the PowerPoint now, Keisha. I'm officially done showing images.